Hello and welcome. We often hear that we're on the brink of war with Iran. We hear about their nuclear ambitions, their support for militias, their chants of death to America. But what we almost never hear is the full story of how we got here. It's a story that's been deliberately obscured, a complex history replaced by a simple narrative of good versus evil. But if you want to understand the present, you have to understand the past. Recently, historian Scott Horton sat down with Tucker Carlson to unravel this story, a story that begins not with the Ayatollah, but with us. The story, as Horton explains it, begins in 1953. Iran had a democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. His crime? He believed Iran should get a bigger slice of its own oil money. For the CIA and British intelligence, that was unacceptable. So they orchestrated a coup, overthrew the elected government, and reinstalled the monarch, the Shah. This is where the CIA first coined a term you've probably heard: blowback. An internal CIA history of the coup warned that secret operations like this could have unforeseen negative consequences down the line. And the 1979 Iranian Revolution was the blowback from 1953, coming home to roost. For most Americans, the story starts here. Angry Iranians burning American flags and seizing the U.S. embassy. It looked like pure, unprovoked hatred, but it wasn't. It was 26 years of anger at the brutal dictator the United States had installed and supported. The final trigger for the embassy seizure? After the Shah was overthrown, President Jimmy Carter, pressured by influential figures like David Rockefeller, allowed the deposed and cancer-stricken Shah into the United States for treatment. The Iranians saw this as the prelude to another CIA-backed coup to put the Shah back in power. So they stormed the embassy, the very place the 1953 coup had been staged from. The chaos of 1979 was not limited to Iran. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and the Carter administration saw an opportunity to give them their own Vietnam. The U.S., along with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, began funding and arming the Mujahideen. This project, meant to bleed the Soviets, gave birth to a new group of international militants. The leaders of that effort included names you'll recognize: Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri. This was the genesis of Al-Qaeda. At the same time, the U.S. gave a green light to another dictator, Iraq's Saddam Hussein, to invade Iran. Saddam, a Sunni, was terrified that the Shiite revolution next door would inspire his own country's Shiite majority to overthrow him. So he launched a brutal 8-year war, a war that the U.S. supported Saddam, providing him with the intelligence he used to launch chemical weapon attacks against Iranian troops. Ironically, this invasion from an outside enemy did more to solidify the Ayatollah's shaky new regime than anything else. Fast forward to the 1990s. With the Soviet Union gone, a new foreign policy doctrine began to take shape in Washington, pushed by a group known as the neoconservatives. In 1996, a group of them, including Richard Pearl and Douglas Feith, wrote a policy paper for the new Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. It was called A Clean Break. The plan was to secure Israel by radically re-engineering the Middle East. It laid out a bizarre, convoluted strategy. The U.S. should overthrow Saddam Hussein in Iraq. They believed that by replacing him, they could somehow sever the link between Iran and its proxy, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. The goal was never about bringing democracy to Iraq. It was about neutralizing Iran's influence for the benefit of Israel. The 2003 invasion of Iraq was the execution of that clean break plan. The public was sold a story about weapons of mass destruction, but the real objective was to reshape the region. The result was a catastrophic failure. Instead of weakening Iran, the war eliminated its main rival, Saddam, and handed Iraq over to a Shiite-led government friendly to Iran. As one Saudi official put it, the U.S. delivered Iraq to Iran on a golden platter. Realizing their mistake, the neocons in the Bush administration pivoted. Horton calls this the redirection. The new strategy? To counter the Shiite power they had just unleashed, they would now tilt back toward the Sunnis. In practice, this meant supporting the very Sunni extremists the U.S. had been fighting Al-Qaeda affiliates in places like Syria and Lebanon, in order to weaken Iran and its allies. This disastrous policy continued under President Obama. The U.S. backed so-called moderate rebels in Libya and Syria. But these rebels were often the same Al-Qaeda factions who had been killing American soldiers in Iraq. This support led directly to the rise of a new, even more terrifying group, ISIS. The Islamic State was simply a rebranded and empowered Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which grew strong enough to carve out a caliphate thanks to the chaos unleashed by U.S. policy in Syria. So what does this have to do with the famous Iran nuclear deal? According to Horton, the deal, officially called the JCPOA, was less about trust and more about pragmatism. It was created to stop Netanyahu from attacking Iran's nuclear facilities and dragging the U.S. into another massive war. It severely rolled back Iran's program and put it under intense monitoring, creating a one-year breakout time, a buffer to ensure the world would see it coming if Iran ever raced for a bomb. When President Trump, urged by Netanyahu, pulled the U.S. out of that deal in 2018, that buffer was eliminated. Iran, no longer bound by its restrictions, began enriching uranium to higher levels, shortening the time it would need to build a weapon if it chose to. So where does this leave us? In a cycle of intervention and blowback that has lasted 70 years. Each step was a reaction to the failure of the last, digging the hole deeper and deeper. From a coup over oil in 1953, to creating the precursors of Al-Qaeda to fight the Soviets, to invading Iraq to help Israel, to empowering ISIS to counter Iran, and finally to the brink of yet another conflict. The story is complex, and frankly, it's not flattering. It's a story of American foreign policy being driven by an imperial mindset, by the interests of its allies, and by the architects of previous disasters trying to fix their last mistake. It's a story that has cost trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of lives. And it is a story that has almost nothing to do with the safety and prosperity of the American people. It's the context that's always missing. And without it, we can never truly understand why we stand where we stand today. Thanks for watching. With everything that's going on in the world, it's more important than ever to get the full story, not just the approved version. If you agree, and you want to see more content that digs deeper, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss what we're working on next. We appreciate your support.